You have to be kidding me. That is impossible. That is absolutely impossible what he just did. That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Stopped by Iguodala to Curry, back to Iguodala to the rim. Oh, great block. James out of nowhere, skies to the right.
You've got Marshawn Lynch in the backfield. You've got a guy that's been borderline unstoppable in this part of the field.
Steps into it, pass is caught! Diggs! Sideline! Touchdown! Unbelievable! Vikings win it!
If you saw my rankings of quarterbacks going into the season, at least the starters, you would remember that I had Jordan Love just outside my top 10 early in his career at 11. And some might think that's underrating him, some might think that's overrating him. I don't know. What I felt was that what I saw from Jordan Love the second half of last season and in the playoffs was incredibly impressive. I mean, the guy balled out, and he looked like exactly the type of quarterback that you look for when you're building a playoff-capable franchise. And the reason why I wanted to talk about Jordan Love is kind of obvious. He seems to have dodged a massive bullet, and the Packers in general seem to have dodged a massive bullet. Jordan Love, obviously, I think I'm going to pull this up, and I should have already done this, so I apologize for my lack of preparation. I just want to see what they're calling his injury. Because, let's see, Jordan Love, what are they calling it? A knee. It looked like an MCL sprain, maybe a partial tear. But when you first saw it, when you saw it live, I mean, it was at the end of the game. It was towards the end of regulation, and they were trying to maybe see if they can get something last second to make sure that they can fight to win the game. It sucks to see any players get injured, especially quarterbacks, obviously, because they have such a massive direct impact on the game, and especially in the situation where it's a young quarterback, just got paid, he had a phenomenal second half of the season. There's a lot of hype. Hell, I think the Packers have more hype behind them than most teams in the NFL right now. I've seen several analysts on Fox, ESPN, wherever. A lot of people are picking the Packers to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. I'm not one of those guys. I do think that they're an impressive team. I do think that they're a playoff-capable team. I mean, they made it last year when I didn't expect them to, and I initially, going into that season, didn't think too highly of Jordan Love either. Although he will miss time, they are not putting him on IR. And for those of you that aren't familiar, when somebody is put on IR or injured reserve, that means that they are expected to miss a minimum of 4 games. And they're able to bring somebody in the meantime, or elevate somebody off their practice squad in the meantime without taking up a roster spot during the time that player is injured. And so him not being on IR kind of gives optimism. Obviously, it wasn't an ACL tear, because I think a lot of people, when we initially saw it, including myself, thought, oh, fuck, man, this kid, with all the promise and all the hype, just tore his ACL in the first game of the season. Because, listen, it would be far from the first time that the first game of an NFL season for a team that had hype, where an important player on their team is out for the rest of the season and barely got to start. For instance, in this, sorry, Jets fans, Aaron Rodgers last year, tearing his Achilles on the 4th play from scrimmage. That sucks. It's horrible. And to see it happen to Jordan Love, although not that serious, thankfully, it sucks, man. You never want to see that happen. I think this impacts their season greatly. I do. The Packers made an aggressive decision to only have Malik Willis on their roster at quarterback to back up Jordan Love. That was aggressive. And I think Malik Willis has a lot of raw talent, but he's just not a starting NFL quarterback in the NFL. I don't even know if he's the most serviceable backup. To be perfectly honest, he's not. He did not do well in the few opportunities he had in Tennessee, and there's definitely going to be pressure to do something in Jordan Love's absence. And like I said, they don't have him on IR, so perhaps they don't expect him to miss 4 games, but I do. I do. I don't think we see Jordan Love until mid-October. And that kind of sucks because I think that impacts the Packers season massively. I think, and I'd have to look at their schedule, but depending on who they play, there's a chance they don't win the game without Jordan Love. I mean, he's the starting quarterback. He elevates the team. He just does. So him not being there, I think it could affect them making the playoffs, quite honestly, because I don't think Malik Willis is going to be able to do a whole hell of a lot. Now, we'll see. Maybe I'm proven wrong. But that does suck. Again, could have been a lot worse. They obviously still have a fighting chance when he gets back. Even if they do drop all 4 games, they'll have a fighting chance when he gets back, because he'll be healthy, hopefully fully at that point. But kind of dodged a bullet. Also kind of affects your season massively as well. But we'll leave it at that. Jordan Love out for probably a minimum of 3 games. I'd even call it 4. This next one is a little less football related, but it's kind of the elephant in the room in the NFL, and that was the Tyreek Hill incident. Listen, I don't want to get political, and I'm going to avoid it the best I can. No matter how you feel politically, no matter what your opinions are of the police force or whatever, what happened. So a little bit of background. Tyreek Hill, obviously the Chiefs, the Dolphins' star wide receiver, possibly the best wide receiver in the NFL, was detained, to put it lightly, on his way to the game on Sunday. Was forcefully taken out of his car, obviously basically tackled. Not even basically fully, but he was tackled. Pedestrians were detained. It was a mess. I mean, it was a mess. The Miami Police Department, or was it Miami? Were they in Miami? Maybe they were in Jacksonville. Either way, in Florida, and they went. In my opinion, I didn't hear any dialogue. I just saw some footage. Did not look necessary to me. I don't want to go too deep into the political side of it because I don't know enough to really go in, but from what I saw and from what I understand, it didn't seem right to me. It didn't seem at all justified. It was definitely over the top. It was ridiculous. The media that knows better will talk on it outside of me, but I just wanted to bring up that I think that it was wild and ridiculous. At the same time, I gotta say it was kind of, even though we shouldn't maybe necessarily make light of a situation that should be taken seriously, I think that the touchdown celebration where Jaden Waddle was basically miming putting him in handcuffs was absolutely hilarious. Tyreek Hill, I think, handled it as well as you could. It was good that he was able to play in the game despite being detained. I think legally he was arrested, and obviously bailed out in some way, shape, or form. I don't know exactly what happened, if he went to a jail and they had to send someone to bail him out or what. I don't really know the full story. All I know is this is an unfortunate headline because we're talking about a game that ended on a last-second field goal, but we're not really talking about that. We're talking about the situation with Tyreek Hill. So we're taking away from what was a pretty dramatic up-and-down game for both teams, and we're really not focused on that. We're more focused on the situation with Tyreek Hill, and I know that we haven't seen the end of that. Obviously, it's going to continue. A little bit of lighthearted comedy. Tyreek Hill is pretty funny. He still says he wants to be a cop, and he still says he wants to be a porn star when he retires. So listen, he's got a future, I guess, in whatever industry he decides to pursue. They seem like very different career fields to want to get into both, but I just wanted to give my 2 cents on that situation really quickly. Move on back to more football-related stuff. About an hour before kickoff, something like that at least, right before the Dallas game, essentially, Dak Prescott signed his contract extension. I'm not going to go into super details because I'm sure most people have seen it, but it is a 4-year, $240 million contract, and I think there's a lot of guarantees. And for those of you who may not be great at math, $240 million over 40 years is $60 million a year. That makes Dak Prescott the highest paid quarterback yearly and in general in the NFL. Without cutting down Dak Prescott too much, that's too much. I'm not sure if anybody else is going to disagree with that either. I think the general consensus is that Dak is a good quarterback. I think he is a fit for Dallas. It's hard to root against him as a person, obviously. He's a class act. He's gone through a lot in his personal life, as I'm sure a lot of NFL players and people in general, we all go through stuff, but Dak's been a Walter Payton Man of the Year finalist pretty much every year of his career. He's clearly doing great things within the community. So he's an easy guy to root for. And his play during the regular season most often is pretty good. I mean the guy puts up the stats. $60 million a year. I kind of want to put that in perspective really quickly. And I'm going to pull something up so I have the ability to give you the numbers. We're going to look at quarterbacks in the NFL and go over who gets paid the most, and you tell me how you feel about these players. Or I'll tell you how I feel about these players. At number one is Dak Prescott at $60 million a year. Now, this is based off of their annual salary. Dak Prescott at number one. We've established that. Number two, and possibly deservingly so, Joe Burrow, $55 million a year. Number three, where the fuck are we? All these ads. Really should have looked at this before I started recording, so I apologize for the lack of professionalism. It only went to number two? Like, what the fuck? Oh, here we go. I'm stupid. Tied for number two is Trevor Lawrence. Listen, I understand that when we talk about quarterback contracts, a lot of these just don't make sense as far as like what we've gotten from quarterbacks versus other things. For instance, technically speaking, and not even technically speaking, Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL. He's not even top 10. He's not even a top 10 highest paid quarterback in the league. Number two, tied for number two, as well as Jordan Love at $55 million a year. You got Tua Tagovailoa at $53.1 million a year. Jared Goff at $53 million a year. Look like fucking sketch. Justin Herbert, $52.5 million a year. Lamar Jackson, $52 million even a year. Jalen Hurts, $51 million a year. And at 10 is Kyler Murray for $46.1 million per year. Now, Patrick Mahomes does have the largest total contract in the NFL as far as paid quarterbacks go. He's getting paid $450 million along the span of his contract, but that doesn't break down to as much yearly. Dak Prescott in the playoffs. Listen, Dak Prescott is this generation's Tony Romo, and I don't just say that because he's on the Cowboys. I maybe could argue that he's a little bit more successful than Tony Romo, but I guess that depends on who you're asking as well. But most of the quarterbacks on the list that I gave you, the top 10, people would argue are overpaid, right? Dak's overpaid. I would not have signed Dak Prescott to a $60 million a year deal. I understand why Dallas did. And listen, he played well. He had a good game against Cleveland. Say what you will about Cleveland, especially offensively, but defensively, they're dogs on that defense. And he played really well. And does he deserve the pay? Yeah, from an overall perspective, sure. That's not what I'm arguing. But if we were to ignore the numbers and how much each quarterback is getting paid right now, and we were to talk about who should get paid accordingly, like who should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, not sure Dak cracks your top 10. No matter who you ask. I'm just not sure. There was a lot going into the season for Dallas. The CeeDee Lamb contract negotiation was big, and they got that done right before the season started. Really, a week or so ago. And then right as the season is about to kick off, literally, for Dallas, they get the deal done with Dak. I understand why they did it. The number is just very high. But I guess we'll see what's to come for Dak Prescott and the Cowboys. I don't believe you're going to see many playoff wins, possibly a lot of playoff berths, possibly a handful of division-winning, seasons. I don't know about playoff victories, especially against the other competition that he just can't seem to get past. That's my real thing. Dak Prescott in the regular season, he's good. Pay him. But you pay guys that kind of money when you think that they can bring you a Super Bowl, and I'm just not quite sure he can. Just my opinion. We're going to finish off this video with my last, I guess we can call it a story. Over the last couple of years, you have seen a very tumultuous roller coaster of a career in Baker Mayfield's. Baker Mayfield drafted number 1 overall to Cleveland. Shows a lot of promise in year 1. So, whether you want to say he takes a step back later on, doesn't matter. He brings the Cleveland Browns to the playoffs for the first time at that point in well over a decade, to my understanding. And things are looking up in Cleveland. Baker Mayfield looks like the quarterback of the future. He's played very well. He's improving. He beats the division rival Pittsburgh Steelers in a playoff game for the first playoff win the Browns have had since I've been alive. 26 years old. They never won a playoff game in my lifetime. He goes into Pittsburgh, who have habitually won playoff games year in, year out. I mean, they can't lose. They very rarely lose. In my lifetime, they have 2 Super Bowls. 2? Am I fucking stupid? They have Super Bowls within my lifetime. Either 1, 2, whatever. 2. Pretty sure Ben won 2. I should know that right off the top of my head, but it's late, so give me a break. And the culture seemed to have changed in Cleveland. Okay? And Baker Mayfield maybe doesn't look like a top 5 quarterback, possibly not even top 10, but he's winning games in Cleveland. He follows one of the seasons up, maybe not having a great year, right? As that's happening, Houston has a quarterback named Deshaun Watson, who at the time is an absolute phenom. Say what you want about who he is now, and I have a lot to say, and I'm going to get there. Before the allegations, before the trade request, I, as well as several other people, would have told you that Deshaun Watson was a top 5 quarterback in the NFL because he was playing like it. Balling. You want to talk about a playmaker at the quarterback position? Deshaun Watson was up there with any of them. Looked incredible. Due for a heavy bag in Houston. But he wasn't happy in Houston, clearly. Deshaun Watson couldn't make it to the playoffs. Maybe, I think he might have once, but couldn't win playoff games, period. Houston was on the downward spiral as an organization before last year, maybe a year before that. I would have told you they were the worst run organization in the NFL in the last several seasons. Deshaun Watson was a bright spot on that team who was absolutely balling. And at that time, right, at this time, Deshaun Watson in Houston, Baker Mayfield in Cleveland, I think unanimously people would have said Deshaun Watson's a better quarterback than Baker Mayfield. Fast forward to the trade request, right? You can argue that there was a little bit of turmoil between Baker Mayfield and the Browns, but I think it was more Baker Mayfield and the coaching staff, right? Deshaun Watson requests a trade out of Houston because he doesn't think he can succeed in Houston. Not long after the trade request, the infamous allegations just start pouring in. This isn't a secret, right? Dozens of allegations, and at the time of recording, there have been even more come to light. It's rare that you see this amount of allegations, and it's not true. I'm not saying I'm taking a stance, although I think we kind of have an idea. The only thing that was fishy about it at the time was that these allegations were coming at a time that he was requesting a trade out of Houston, and clearly Houston at the time did not want that. But that's all skepticism and speculation. This was an obscene amount of allegations, and horrible allegations at that. Deshaun Watson doesn't play for a full calendar year of football. Baker Mayfield has a season where they don't make the playoffs. The rumors about all the teams, after a little bit of development of these allegations with Deshaun Watson, that wanted Deshaun Watson. Miami was in consideration, obviously Cleveland. You had, I think even the Niners were kind of getting their toes in the water there, trying to figure out what would it take to get him. Ultimately, what ends up happening, Baker Mayfield is out of town. They get rid of him and they bring in the Cleveland Browns, that is, and they bring in Deshaun Watson. They trade for him. They gave up a pretty penny, not just in his contract. To trade for him, they gave up a lot. Deshaun Watson goes a year without playing football and gets the most, at this, with hindsight being 2020, at this point, we look at this contract that Deshaun Watson got from the Cleveland Browns and said that might be inarguably the worst contract in NFL history. At the time, even though the contract was crazy, and everybody still, even if Deshaun Watson was still as good, we would still be looking at that contract like that contract's fucking crazy. And it is. And it was at the time. And Baker Mayfield was winning playoff games in Cleveland, and he'd only been there for so long, to an organization that had been the ridicule of the National Football League for decades and decades and decades. They couldn't buy a playoff berth before Baker Mayfield gets there. Now Deshaun Watson's in Cleveland. There's a suspension. When are we going to see him play? He's getting paid $230 million, fully guaranteed. Fully, 100%. Baker Mayfield goes to Carolina. It doesn't look good. I mean, at that time, we're like, okay, clearly the Browns, even if Deshaun isn't quite what he was before, Baker doesn't look good, right? He had a couple of moments, but for the most part, Baker doesn't look good. He leaves. Deshaun Watson starts to play. Maybe we see a few glimpses of what he used to be, but nothing. For the most part, we're kind of concerned about Deshaun Watson. Baker Mayfield goes to the Rams, expected to be a backup, gets an opportunity to play a game or two, plays fucking hero ball randomly, wins a game or two, and is offered a chance after the retirement of Tom Brady to go play in Tampa Bay. Since Baker Mayfield has been in Tampa, Deshaun Watson has played arguably as one of the worst quarterbacks in football. If you watch the game this past weekend against Dallas, that's basically what we've seen from Deshaun Watson in Cleveland. Simultaneously, Baker Mayfield is absolutely balling in Tampa Bay. Balling out. So who won the trade? Who won that situation? No doubt, Baker Mayfield did.